Hello everyone, it's Friday. We're getting ready for Parshat Noach, and we have three very generous sponsors for this week's video, Dvar Torah. The Dvar Torah is sponsored by Jackie Brenner in memory of her brother Alan, Zichrona Livracha, as well as her mother Arlene, Zichrona Livracha, whose yortzites are observed on the 4th of Cheshvan and the 9th of Cheshvan, respectively. And it should be an aliyah for their neshamas, and we thank you, Jackie, for the sponsorship. The video of Torah is also sponsored by Dr. Richard Shechtman in memory of his mother, Sadie Shechtman, whose yortzeit was observed this week, and it should be an aliyah for her neshama as well. And we thank you, Dick, for the sponsorship. Thank you to both of you. And finally, the Pre-Shabbat video of Dvar Torah is sponsored by Ruth Beck in honor of Carol Shower, YIB's very devoted and very efficient administrative director. And she certainly is and is well deserving of the recognition. And we thank you, Ruth, for giving us the opportunity to thank and recognize Carol. It is not difficult to find similarities between the year 2020 and the events described in this week's Parsha. Just like in the Torah, which describes a great flood that covered the entire world and brought with it destruction and death everywhere it went, so too we are suffering from a global pandemic, a flood, so to speak, that has covered the entire world, a virus that unfortunately has killed so many. And just like in the Torah, when the few that would survive, Hashem tells Noach and his family to isolate, to quarantine, to go into an ark, and to seal themselves off. Similarly, that is what many have experienced this year and are still experiencing. The only way to survive is to separate themselves, to cut themselves off from others, even from their loved ones, from children, grandchildren. And just like there was nothing for Noach and his family to do over the time of the flood, all they could do was wait and to pray until the storm would pass. So too, for most of us at least, there's not much to do other than to follow the appropriate guidelines to stay safe and to wait and to daven until the virus will pass. And so I hope to bring out a few lessons from this week's Parsha, and given that background, hopefully they will resonate and they will be particularly meaningful this year, 2020. The Torah is not only concerned why the world was deserving of this destructive flood, and it is not only concerned, it does not only describe why Noach and his family were chosen to be saved, or how and why they survived the year, but the Torah is certainly also concerned and wants to teach to us about how Noach and his children reacted and responded and began again after the flood was done and after they had left the ark. Vayu b'nei Noach hayotzim min hateva Shem v'Cham v'Yafes. And Noach, and he had 3 sons, exited with him from the ark. And as we will see, there were 3 models amongst them, 3 primary models of how they reacted after the flood. What did they learn? Who were they after the flood? Noach, vayachal Noach ish hadama vayita karem. And Noach, the man of the land, he plants a vineyard soon after the flood is done. Vayesht minayayin vayishkar, and he drinks from the wine and he becomes drunk. Vayiskal b'socha alo, and he uncovers himself. He is left naked and compromised in his tent. That is what the Torah describes. There seems to be a lot left that is not described in the Torah, but it is clear that after the flood, that after Noach re-enters the world, he doesn't know how to deal with it. As the Medrash says, he begins the Parsha, Noach ish sadik, he is the ish sadik, the man of righteousness, and he has now become ish hadama, the man of the land. Perhaps he is guilty for not bringing more people with him. He sees the destruction and he can't believe or can't understand why he was saved. He's not sure how to begin again in this new world. He's experienced so much destruction, so much death. He has felt that burden on his shoulders. He simply does not know how to proceed. He plants a vineyard, he drinks wine, and he becomes drunk. There are some people that after experiencing great trauma, a great tragedy in their own personal lives, in the world, and they are broken. Noach was broken. They do not know how to proceed, and it's clear they're not the same person that they were before the tragic events. And we don't judge and we don't criticize, but that is a human response. It's just too much to deal with, and that seems to be how Noach reacted. And so that left his sons to decide how they would react, how they would fill in the void, with Noach no longer being the clear spiritual leader of their family and of the entire world. Vayar Cham ate ervat aviv. And so first it is his son Cham who sees the nakedness of his father, the nakedness, the literal nakedness, and also how he had fallen, how he was helpless. According to our sages, Cham either castrated Noach in this moment of helplessness or even raped him. And he goes and he tells his two brothers, he informs them of Noach and what he did. Cham, also having experienced the destruction of the flood, came away with the following lesson. He saw that apparently the way God sees the world, the way God runs the world, it is the strongest that survive. Physically, naturally, from a Darwinian perspective, it is the strong that survive and the weak that die. That is the way of the world. And even spiritually, it is the undeserving that are discarded and the deserving that are protected, that are rewarded. Certainly that was the lesson from the flood. All of the wicked world were simply destroyed. And so Cham sees Noach and he sees him again in this lowly, fallen state. And he realizes that his father is no longer, he can no longer be the spiritual leader. He no longer is the righteous tzaddik. And so Cham realizes that is his place, the generation of his brothers, to take over. And so he, whatever he does to his father, it is meant to exert his power and his authority and his leadership. It is meant to discard Noach. It is meant to only accentuate his lowly, disgraced state. And he wishes to tell that to his brothers because it is the strong that should lead in both physical and spiritual matters, and the rest, the weak, the undeserving, the unrighteous, should be left, should be discarded, should be punished, should even be killed. There are some people that after they experience great trauma and pain, they have been hurt. Cham was also hurt. Cham lived through the destruction of the flood, and it left him hardened. It left him desensitized. If he experienced pain and he overcame it, if he experienced suffering and he overcame it, if he was chosen to be one of the survivors, that it means he is the strong, the rest are the weak, and they can deal with it. But of course, that is not the reaction of the final two sons of Noach. Vayikach Shem v'Yafes es hasimla. Shem and Yafes also see their father. They also realize that Noach has fallen. They know he is no longer the Ish Tzaddik, but instead of denigrating him, instead of trying to discard him, instead of trying to exert their authority or power over him, they seek to preserve his dignity. And they walk in backwards and they take a garment, Vayechasu eis ervas avihem, and they cover their father's nakedness, literally and figuratively as well. They also realize that Noach is no longer the person that he was, that they will need to take over the leadership of the family and the world, and so they do exert such leadership. By taking the garment, by walking in, by covering over their father, they are certainly doing that. But to use a phrase of today, they are leading with kindness. They do not seek to destroy or to discard or to strip others of their dignity, of their basic human value. They will take over. They will be the leaders. They will assert themselves, but in a way that, again, is with kindness, is that preserves the dignity of others, that does not seek to destroy or to discard, but to protect others, to help others, to care for others. There are others who, after experiencing trauma and pain, after feeling pain themselves, after having persevered through suffering themselves, are not hardened, but just the opposite, are more sensitized to pain because they know what it means to hurt. Shem and Yafet, Shem in particular, who was the leader according to our sages, remembered what it felt like to be in the ark, to be helpless, to be alone, and to not be able to take care of himself. He sees Noach. Noach apparently was alone in his tent. Neither his sons nor his wife was there. He is alone. He is helpless. He is in some ways pathetic. But Shem knows what that feels like. And so he realizes this is his time to become the leader, to assert himself, but not to rule over others, but just the opposite, to care for them, to protect them, to lead with kindness. After going through the difficult period, he comes out more sensitive, more empathetic, a kinder person. And so the lesson for us is just that, to lead with kindness, as they say today. That even when there is a conflict and contrast in ideas, even when a person needs to assert themselves and be a leader, they should do so with kindness. We need more kindness in the world. That is the message of Shem and Yafet. To conclude with a quote from the great book and great movie, Wonder. If you haven't read it or seen it, you should. But as it goes, if you have a choice between being right and being kind, choose being kind. That is the lesson of Shem and Yafet. Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos.